HMVS Cerberus. Her Majesty's Victorian ship, Cerberus. Now, it would be hard placed to argue this is not a key ship. I could try, but I'm not going to, because of course I'm going to argue it is a key ship, because it's rather beautiful. But I'm also going to do a shameless book plug. And this might be very quick, because, yes, it's now 1:30, and I haven't got any of the lunch on, and I'm leaving at 3 o'clock, so I need to get this done quickly, don't I? So, shameless book plug. Cerberus. Now, entered Hobson's Bay on April 9th, 1871, and was, at that point, considered one of the most modern ironclads afloat. This is despite being one of the most terrible sailing vessels there, because if you consider this, she is rolled to 40 degrees. Her out-of-water weight was 1,900 tons as compared with an underwater weight of 1,800 tons. Yeah, this is not a well-designed ship in that regard. And by that, what they mean is the weight above the water versus the weight inside the water. This is why she's rolling so much. Because she's not balanced. She is given to the Victorian government, well, they're given money, £100,000 towards the cost of a modern warship because of their support in the New Zealand War. That's their value. Their support in the New Zealand War. They have value, but their value comes from the New Zealand War. But that's why they get Cerberus. That's why they get this. Now, let's be honest. This is a pretty potent looking vessel. And it's laid down in 1867. It's launched in 1868. And it's completed in August 1870. And honestly, if you are sitting there looking at going, hang on, Alex, that looks like someone's ripped off the US Monitor designs, some of the later ones, and have got the same issues that some of the later ones had, and some of the even the earlier ones had, you would be right. It is. It's a powerful ship. Let's be honest. Something which is made of that much weight is going to be a powerful vessel. And as you can see, it's a flat bottom vessel. It's a coastal vessel. You know, she is considered, well, they describe her in paper talk as representing the last word in naval architecture. There's no such thing as the last word in naval architecture. There's always every ship is the last word in naval architecture because it's the most recent one built. But, you know, there's no such thing really, therefore. She was, when she enters service, the most powerful vessel in the southern seas. And that is unarguable. Whether she's still afloat is a different matter. But what she's a guard ship. She is a guard ship. You know, by World War One, her weapons and boilers were inoperable, and she's literally serving as a guard ship's ammunition store, while carrying the personnel of the Royal Australian Naval College, technically on her paybooks. But she's a guard ship. Her purpose, her duty, her role is to be a very powerful presence in a very key harbour, the other side of the world from the main fleet, to make sure that anyone thinking they can do a quick coup de main, come in and take over, is going to have something nasty there to go, excuse me. It's a very nice way of saying we have local strength. Doesn't mean much, but we have local strength. She has a displacement of 3,390 tons, which makes you really worry about the sheer weight of those guns. If they made her just slightly longer, slightly fatter, she could have been a very, very mobile vessel. I'm still not sure I'd have thought her a brilliant vessel, but, you know, she'd have been a very mobile vessel, but she'd have been less suitable for her task, because her task and her hull shaping is mainly designed for the fact that she has to stay so close to shore. She is going to be protecting that harbour. She doesn't really need to move around at long range at sea. So, whilst myself, I would like her to have been more powerful, if she'd been more powerful and more viable in terms of doing long range sailing, the odds are she'd have been used for a lot more and ended up in a weird, wacky place. Instead of what she is where she's a breakwater, sunk in 1926. Although by that point she had been renamed as HMVS Platypus II, which is just rude. Not even Platypus number 1, she's Platypus number 2. It's rude. 2 Maudsley Sun and Field steam engines. Always nice. Gave them 1,369 indicated horsepower. 2 shafts for a top speed of 9.75 knots, but pretty much you're doing 6 knots. So, definitely not a fast ship. And peacetime strength, 12 officers, 84 sailors. Wartime, an additional 40 personnel. A couple of those would have been officers, but most of the rest would have been sailors. And there was a talk at some point of some being technically badged as Marines, but I don't think that ever came about. Armament, 4 10-inch rifled muzzle loading guns in 2 twin turrets. So, basically, you roll them forward to fire them, and then afterwards, you bring them back in and you load them from the front. That'll be fun. 2 single 12-pounder bronze howitzers. Okay. 4 4-barrel 1-inch Norvelt guns. They're turning up quite popular today. 2 single Norvelt 6-pounder guns. Again, useful. You start to realise very quickly what are these things for. And 2 single Maxim Norvelt 14-pounder quick-firing guns. And those are added in 1883, 1890 and 1897 respectively. Again, it's about a deterrence mission. To an extent, it's possibly a deterrence mission on pirates as well. In case any of the pirates from the Singaporean sort of Straits area to sort of the South China Sea decide to try and work their way south, well, if they work their way too far south, they meet HMVS Cerberus. That will go, hello. Now, she has what I would call the warrior chic of armour, because she has been, depending on the area, 6 to 8 inches of iron. Backed by, well, for want of a better word, iron. It's sort of armour steel, but it's not really armour steel, so we'll go with iron. Backed by 9 to 11 inches of teak. The metallurgy on it is interesting. The metallurgy on it is very, very interesting. It's considered armor plating. Let's just call it armor plating, but it's not what armor plating will become. The breastwork, which was to defend the citadel, varied in thickness from 8 to 9 inches. The gun turrets had 10 inches on their face and 9 inches on the sides. And Cerberus was also protected by an armoured deck. And for added protection, she could take water into the ballast tanks, which would decrease her low freeboard until only the turrets and breastwork were visible. Think about that. She can basically sink down. So for someone trying to sink her, she's basically a mobile fort. She goes, she sinks, and then it's a case of... How am I supposed to engage that? It's actually designed to sink. That's why it has the shaping it does. It's designed to sink down and go boom, boom, boom. Doesn't make it any more stable, but, you know, it works. There's always the possibility that she'll touch the bottom. And basically, she is supposed to defend. The reason for the point of defending time is the fear of a Russian attack. Again, I'm not sure where exactly the focus on the Russians is coming from here, but they did have some very interesting ships at the time, so I can see why it is. But I'd say they're picking on the Russians because they don't want to talk about the other likely offender, because let's be honest, there is another power which was growing and starting to develop itself at the time, which kept liking to go hunting around in the Far East, and would later on get very interested in hunting around in the Far East, and would actually fight a war with another empire to take over them. So, yeah, there are powers interested in Far Eastern colonies, including in the Australian area. So her career. Well, her career is suitably interesting. She was registered as a merchant vessel for a voyage to Australia, and so the sides of the hull were built up to the height of the breastwork, along the length of the ship in order to improve its sea keeping. She tried to sail from Chatham to Melbourne on 29th October 1870, but returned because of gale conditions, making the ship uncontrollable. She was then fitted with temporary masts, so she could be rigged as a three-masted bark to provide redundancy for the steam engines and maximise her range before recalling was required. She departed again on the 7th of November. It's always sensible to be departing in winter from the UK and wondering about the gales. And conditions were similarly bad, but she was able to persevere. She travelled via the Suez Canal, in which passage she flew the flag of Victoria instead of the Red Ensign. This was because it would reduce the transit cost, because it was cheaper to transit a warship through Suez than it was a merchant ship. She had to stop a lot to refuel. She's not a long day. Her 10-day, theoretical 10-day bunker capacity turned out to be closer to 8 days at various points. Her ship's company mutinied, well, nearly mutinied on several occasions. Basically, the fine line between whether it's actually or not a mutiny depends on how quickly you think they gave in to them. She actually finally reached Melbourne on the 9th of April 1871, and at this point she's designated the flagship of the Victorian Navy. Public opinion was, what have we spent our money on? And they call her a floating gasometer. Ten-years later, she loses some men who are destroyed by a mine during exercises floating in a boat. They're the only men she ever loses in her operational history. Following the flooding of the New Australian gold mine at Creswick, 2 of the divers from Cerberus were sent to help 5 miners trapped in air pockets in the mine. They couldn't assist, though, because the incorrectly fitting dive suits had been sent with them, and only 500 metre of air hose was available. This was despite the miners being minimum 500 feet of air hose being available, 150 metres, sorry. Despite the miners being about 1,500 feet from the mine's entrance. So they need to send about 4 to 5 times the hose they did. It's refitted with torpedo netting and spars in 1887, and at some point in 1890s it's retasked as a store ship. In May 1900, one of its ship's company actually showed symptoms of the bubonic plague. It was fun when that turns up again, and all the personnel were therefore quarantined at Point Napan. when in 1901 Australia is turned into a federation, Cerberus is transferred to the Commonwealth Naval Forces of Australia, which is of course renamed as the Royal Australian Navy in 1911. At which point Cerberus gets the prefix HMAS. By 1909 she could no longer generate enough steam to propel herself, and therefore after she's used as a guard and munitions ship during World War One. There's also the point that to actually get her, they had to build special derricks to get her anchors off the surface of the seabed, because they'd been down there so long. They got so embedded. But still, in 1913, as mentioned, it's the personnel of the Royal Australian Naval College are actually listed on the paybooks as Cerberus, because the college was not a commissioned establishment. But by 1914, their main guns are inoperable, although seriously, how is there any ship going around in 1914 that they would actually want to use those guns against? Seriously, there's like anything floating around that you want to fight in this thing? When the J-class submarines joined the Royal Australian Navy, she's renamed Platypus and is reclassified as a secondary submarine tender. She's taken a name from the actual submarine tender, HMAS Platypus, so she becomes their secondary one. And she's towed to Greenlog for this. At some point in that period, what had previously been known as HMAS Protector became Cerberus and attached to the training base at Western Point Port and Western Port Bay, and that base took the name in 1921. You can still find her. This is the interesting thing. She was built so solidly, you could still find her remains. And they have considered several points for recovering her, because she sits in roughly 3 meters of water, less than 200 meters from the shore, and she's been sunk as a breakwater, and she's become a popular site for scuba diving, unsurprisingly. At several points, people have considered raising and restoring her. It would be lovely to see them do so, but at the moment point, it seems to be current funding, as far as I can see, is planned to focus on corrosion control of the wreck, along with interpretive devices on nearby shores. I look forward to hopefully finding out what those might be at some point. Anyway, thank you for watching. I know I haven't ended any of the key ships videos in questions, but that's because I'm honestly under the cosh to record these as quickly as possible. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and live will be again on Sunday. That's when lives return, when I'm back from teaching and I'm awake after my sister's birthday. Basically, I have function in my sister's birthday and her desire to cook the birthday meal for everyone into the time away. And so there will be key ship video recordings coming after this to cover that period. I might be live on Twitch, I might not be. Take care, and thank you for watching.